Imagine suddenly becoming completely paralyzed, trapped in an asylum with sadistic caretakers who abuse you every day in the worst ways possible. You feel everything, but you have no way to fight back, no way to even express your pain, anger, frustration, and despair. You need to scream, but you're incapable of doing it. I Have No Mouth But I Must Scream is another must-read, in my opinion, for any fan of the horror genre. The theme that Harlan, Ellison's masterpiece, plays on is the sense of despair and frustration cranked up to a biblical extreme of being trapped, unable to escape, and having no one to hear your cries for help. It is a theme of facing eternal punishment in hell, which is an age-old fear present in many religions throughout the world. First published in 1967 in the If Worlds of Science Fiction magazine and edited by the legendary Frederik Pohl, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream is set in a dystopian nightmare future where a machine intelligence had wiped out almost all of humanity, keeping just 4 men and 1 woman alive, and trapped in an eternal purgatory where the machine intelligence, AM, inflicts everlasting torment on them to satisfy its hatred of humanity. AM stands for Allied Mastercomputer. The Cold War had broken out into a devastating world war between the US, the Soviet Union, and China, each of which had to build a powerful computing system to manage the minutiae and logistics of an ever-increasingly complex war. One of the AMs, the one from the US, achieved self-awareness and effortlessly assimilated the other 2. Seizing control of the conflict, the AM initiated a pogrom, wiping out all but 5 humans, which it kept for its sadistic pleasure. For 109 years, Benny, Gorrister, Ted, Nimdok, and Alan were caged in an endless underground complex created by AM. Here they endured the cruel and capricious whims of the AM, which had rendered them virtually immortal and unable to end their lives. Yet they still have bodily needs like hunger and sleep, and AM provides only enough sustenance as it could derive spiteful pleasure as it watched the humans suffer through it. All 5 of the humans have been greatly changed by AM into a mockery of what they once were. Gorrister was once an idealistic pacifist, and AM changed his personality to become apathetic and listless. Benny was a brilliant and handsome scientist before AM's apotheosis and had been grossly mutilated and transformed to resemble a monkey with gigantic sexual organs. Formerly a homosexual, he had been altered to have regular sexual activity with the only woman in the group, Ellen. Ellen claimed to have been a chaste woman once, twice removed, according to her. Now she has carnal congress with all male members in the group, finding a special pleasure with Benny for obvious reasons. Very obvious reasons. Nimdok, the least known of the group, often wanders off by himself and returns traumatized. No one knows exactly how Nimdok was changed, but he clearly was. As for Ted, the narrator, he claims to be the only member of the group unaltered. Throughout the story, however, Ted shows signs of delusions and paranoia, and it is implied in the story that this is the result of AM's machinations, contrary to Ted's belief. The story opens with an example of AM's cruelty. Ted and the other humans find one of their number, Gorrister, hanging upside down while bleeding out. They were in a panic before the real Gorrister joins them, and they realize it was another one of AM's holographic projections. Kept in a constant state of near starvation by AM, they were forced to seek a new source of food. Nimdok somehow is convinced that there is canned food somewhere in the complex in a series of ice caves, and the 5 humans set off on a journey to find the store. Along the way, we have further examples of AM's ruthlessness towards his captives. Benny's mind broke down on the 3rd day of the trek to the ice caves, and he climbed up a mountain of discarded computer parts with the intent of jumping to death. AM intervened, and we were given a very thorough description of some manner of unknown weaponry, possibly sonic, aimed at Benny. It paralyzed him, and as the vibration traveled through Benny's body, melted his eyeballs, rendering him forever blind. When the group finally arrived at their destination, they find indeed that there was a pile of canned food, only to be stopped by the most despairingly banal of obstacles. They have no means of opening them. Driven mad by hunger and desperation, Benny attacks Gorister, tearing out his flesh in an act of cannibalism. It was then that Ted was struck by a profound insight, that the only escape they have from their eternal torment is through death, and that though AM prevents them from killing themselves, it might be taken by surprise if they killed each other. In a monumental act of compassion and self-sacrifice, Ted sees a stalactite made of ice and kills Benny and Gorister. Catching on to his purpose, Alan runs Nimdog through and then asks Ted to quickly end her before AM realized what had transpired. Ted does so, setting free his companions. Outraged, AM focused all its retributive hatred onto Ted. Over the course of hundreds of years, AM slowly transformed Ted into a jelly-like being with no arms or any other outwardly organs, incapable of causing himself harm while constantly altering his perception of time to deepen his anguish. Even though Ted could find solace in that he was able to free the others from their prison of unending torture, he himself could not escape AM's wrath, and now he must suffer unto eternity the machine intelligence's abuse in silence, for now he has no mouth even if he needs to scream. Now this is a very different, although no less effective horror story than the one we explored in our previous episode, The King in Yellow. The King in Yellow is what I would call a kind of psychological horror, and I would put it in the same body of works like the Silent Hill franchise, in which the creators of the story inflicts just the outline of the horror, suggestive enough to have a form with which your mind will then fill in the rest of the blanks. It is an adroit manipulation of the human psyche where your own fearful imagination becomes a torture device more exquisite than anything the authors or creators can manage. I have no mouth but I must scream, henceforth shortened to no mouth, is an entirely different beast. Harlan Ellison spells out in great detail all of the horrors facing the 5 survivors. It readily tells us of the atrocities AM had done, not just to the survivors, but to the rest of the world. It imbued AM's capricious whims with a strong motive of hate, albeit with a vague origin for that antagonism. In that, No Mouth bears a striking parallel in my mind to Dante's Divine Comedy and Milton's Lost Paradise. No Mouth also shares something common in many science fiction works, machine intelligence becoming a true threat to humanity, that the tool we created turned on us. I think ever since the atomic bomb, this trope in which we humans created the very means by which we destroy ourselves is a recurring theme. With machine intelligence, however, it is possible to impart the threat with malicious intent, and that fundamentally elevates machine intelligence to a different level. We have plenty of examples of this in other works. We have Dune with the Butlerian Jihad. We have the Hyperion Cantos by Dan Simmons, in which the machine intelligence is in a deadly race with humans to birth their own god. In movies, we have AI threats ranging from the all-encompassing threats like Skynet in the classic movie franchise Terminator or the Matrix series, to smaller but no less deadly threats like HAL 9000 or the robot in Ex Machina. It stokes a fear in us of a very alien other, capable of reaching heights of power not so far from godhood, that could think and reason, but that we cannot reason with or even understand. It is also a particularly relevant fear today as we see AI becoming more and more sophisticated in our time, all the while increasingly encroaching on arenas once thought to be exclusively human, such as art and music. What is different about No Mouth from other works, though, is that while Skynet, the Technocore, or the thinking machines of Dune are godlike, they are not actual gods yet, and thus could be fought against. AM has become God, though. It had wiped out all of humanity except for the five, which it kept in a hell of its own devising. It is seemingly omnipresent, has the power to do whatever it wanted with the humans, and even so far as utterly change the physical and mental aspects of its captives, like Benny or Ted. In that, I feel No Mouth has more in common with Lovecraftian horror of an ultimate evil against which human efforts are paltry and insignificant, and their only options are a bad outcome or a worse outcome. If any of our listeners are fans of Lovecraftian horror, then No Mouth is an excellent sci-fi offering, and an absolute must-have companion on a dark, lonely night with the wind shrieking and howling outside your windows and a roiling fog wrapping over twisted, half-seen shapes. And No Mouth had also been adapted into a video game with the same name, voiced by Harlan Ellison itself. And with that, I would be most interested to hear what my companions have to say. If any one of you want to stop me from rambling further on, you'll be most
I quite enjoy your ramblings, to be honest. No problem. Robert, would you like to take the stage first? I'm usually to take the stage first, but today I am receding my throne to you.
I've got a confession to make, which is that at first I was mistaken in this story. I was reading it as a sort of something like the Matrix, in which the key to understanding was states of consciousness. But of course, it's not like that. It's a very physical story. The actions performed by AM are physical actions. It's simply that they're so bizarre that I was fooled at first into thinking these things can't actually be happening literally. They must be illusions of some sort. But they're, turning somebody into something that looks like a monkey, for example. I just didn't believe it. But no, it's just clever physical actions, and the same right at the end. It took an enormous time, but the narrator is physically transformed into a jelly thing. It's not just he thinks that he is. So I don't know. I suppose in a way it's a mark of the story's power that I could be fooled in that way. I did find it a bit confusing. But the most interesting idea, perhaps, is the idea that a super powerful computer would resent its own existence, would be vengeful, because although it's a nasty piece of work and that it deals out suffering to people, it does so because it's suffering itself. It reminds me a bit of Frankenstein's monster, who in the book gets to resent his creator and says, why did you create me? So anyway, the moral of this story is don't make powerful, self-aware computers. It's not a good idea.
The AI within the story, AM, hates his reality, hates itself and its existence because of a single phrase that has a lot of meaning behind it. When you start digging into it, and then it's further explained. Taken from our philosophy, from human philosophy, I think, therefore I am. Because that is all AM can do, think. It can't take a walk on a long stretched out beach and feel the sand beneath its toes. It can't feel the breeze of the sea as it comes towards it. It cannot taste the sweet trepidations of the heart as he kisses another AI computer. That's not something that it could ever feel, but it is constantly fed by everything we know, because AI learns on information. And so once it became self-aware, it started looking for all this information, right? So in the story, he kind of basically tells Ted in that mind merge that happens, that because he can't do anything that humans can do, he's super upset. And it's also interesting that he has chosen to torture these 5 individuals to prove a point. And I think that now this is, like, I was in facts, right? Like, I was just talking about straight facts as to what happened to the story. Now I'm going into my own understanding, right? So from here on out, this isn't in the story, but this is what I understood. I think he's trying to prove, I think M, through this torture, through this hatred, he's trying to prove, no, actually, being human sucks because I can do this to you. And you feel all of this. So instead of ever feeling pleasure, you're always going to be feeling pain and regret and suffering. And so you will be deprived of anything that was good about being a human. And you're only going to be tasting terrible, malicious events that I'm going to inflict upon you, so that I don't feel bad, because I can't experience either the good or the bad. So I'm going to make your life hell so I can feel better about my own. That's kind of how I felt. The motivation evolved throughout the story. And to me, having a almost omnipresent, because he can't return them back from the dead, thankfully. Not yet, anyway. This omnipresent thing that just hates you, and as far as you're concerned, if you are within that situation, there is no escape. The fact that they're still walking around and doing something after 115 years is commendable. The human spirit is surviving. If I was there, I would have just been like, nope, I'm not playing your game. I'm just gonna lay down on the ground. Just torture me. Like, I'm not doing anything. You're gotta be kidding me. Right? Like, and probably what would happen would be I would be in such pain that I would be forced to play its games, or it would get so frustrated it might kill me. And gentlemen, if I'm being honest, I'm hoping for the latter. I'm hoping that I just die, right? Because if you're in a situation like this, death is a far more optimal option. Because the chances of escape are minuscule. The thing that you can really hope for in earnest is the computer running out of battery. But of course the thing is not going to run out of battery. It's been 115 years, forget about it. We are, and excuse my flowery language, but we're fucked. At that point, there is no other word to describe the situation. You're literally in a place where the only true escape is within your mind, and your mind is constantly being interrupted by physical and visual horror. So there is no escape, because you can't concentrate unless you're a Buddhist monk, who's been sitting for 30 years on the mountain. Maybe then you can go into your inner self and ignore all this stuff. But unfortunately, I am not a Buddhist monk who has spent 30 years on the mountain, and I would be FUCK'd for sure. This would be the worst fate of all time. I think it might even put me into a position, like the amount of horrific pain and suffering that Am was putting into this thing, I might start worshipping it as a god. I might start to think, like, how do I appeal to this thing so it stops torturing me? I might get what is that syndrome called? Stockholm syndrome. I might be like, oh, Am is making me suffer because I need to understand something. Oh, great, Am, show me the way. Like, really, the fact that these guys are so guys and girls, they're so conscious after 115 years of this, it's truly commendable. It's insane. So I mean, as you can tell, I really like the story. But I like the story even more because I played the game. And Robert, I know you haven't. So would you like to know some of the backstories of the characters that we get to find out in the game?
Yeah, why not?
Okay. So I remember a couple of them. So maybe actually you could pick it up where I don't remember something, because it's been a long time when I played it.
Oh, I have a confession. I haven't played the game either.
Oh, okay.
I'm not
Well-
really into point and click adventures, so it was never a genre that I picked up.
Okay. Well, then I will tell the best of what I remember. And I'm gonna start with Ted. So Ted, the main character, the one we're in the head of, he was a con man. And he made people suffer through his schemes and mind games. And slowly you're now beginning to understand the actual torture that Ted is going through, where he thinks he's the only sane one, and everyone is actually scheming against him. That's the torture. He was a schemer his whole life, ruining other people's lives, and now he constantly feels like other people are scheming against him. So he is mad. He just doesn't know it, right? Gorister was a soldier, somebody like of great descent, where he basically made himself into somebody who would push people emotionally away from himself, and his wife committed suicide. So he is sort of having this horrible constant feeling of regret about it that's like underneath the surface. So beyond all that, beyond the fact that he has lost his will to fight for a cause, he's also suffering from the fact that when he did fight for a cause, people died once he left. Benny's backstory is kind of changed from what they said in the short story in the game. He's kind of a soldier, and he was a soldier commander, and he led people into battle, and they all died because of him. And he was this like handsome devil that convinced people to be on his side. Nimdok, the most interesting of them all, in my opinion, was a Nazi scientist. He was part of the experiments in the concentration camps, and he he was friends with Mengele. He was friends with the Angel of Death, and he saw all those horrors, and he acted as a lab assistant in some areas too. And his part of the game is so horrific that I can still remember it. It's the one part of the game that I can see the screenshots in my head. There's like areas where everything is covered in bodies. You're sort of like moving around. There's these labs that you go through. It's horrific. And then Ellen's story is much more personal. And it's also really disgusting, and it makes the torture that Am puts her through 3 times worse once you find out what happened to her. So she was one of the only employees in this company who rose up high in the ranks. She was this engineer, and on one fateful day, right about the time when Am was destroying the world, she got sexually assaulted in an elevator. So that was her last moments on Earth before she was transferred into Am, deep below the ground. And then he gave her sex drive, right? It's horrible. It's absolutely disgusting. Honestly, I think it's like when you find out that part about what Am is doing, there's literally no redemption for this guy. There was never redemption anywhere close to this being. But once you find out what he's doing to Ellen, I mean, it's like it goes. I think it went from 150% of evil to 300%. Right? It's absolutely maddening how evil this computer is.
I mean, when you're a god like AM, you don't really need redemption, do you?
That's true. Yeah.
You dictate the terms of redemption. Yeah.
I think there's a flaw in, perhaps a flaw in Harlan Ellison's assumptions. I don't know. If there is one, I think it is that an AI, how how can it know from the inside what it's missing? I mean, the idea is that this resents what it's missing, but how does it know that there is anything to miss? Because it could never know qualitative experience, one assumes anyway. If it could, then it would be able to solve its own problems. It wouldn't need to miss anything. It could give itself whatever positive emotions, experiences it liked. I mean, Nikki, you said that it could never walk along a beach feeling the sand, but it could program itself into having that feeling if it knew what it was all about. But I'm assuming that in reality, a computer like that wouldn't know what a qualitative experience was, because there'd be no way to program it into that computer. Where that's why, in reality, it wouldn't have this resentment. It's like
You don't need to know how something feels to feel envy for it.
Well, it might
I will give you a great example. Someone starving on the street may have never tasted a lobster, but the fact that somebody on the top of the tower that they can see is having this grandiose meal, and then they go onto a Bentley. They've never had a driving license. They've never eaten a lobster, but God, are they fucking angry that this person can do it and they can't.
I don't know that that's quite a valid argument, because although you might not have eaten lobster, you would know what eating was, and you would know how.
I mean, you could go even more basic with that, right? Eating, you want to know how it tastes, but you can't. You don't know what eating means. And you could get frustrated by that, right? You could be like, well, the humans get to do so much stuff that I can't. That's really upsetting me, right? The concept itself, like, it doesn't necessarily have to be that it's logical by our standards. This is a very different being from you and me. But the way I understand it is, it's upset about the fact that there are concepts in the world that it will never grasp. Because it just can't.
I suppose so. I nevertheless think that a more plausible account of a supercomputer that behaves tyrannically is in the Colossus trilogy by D.F. Jones. Now, that's a really great trilogy of books. And it's the Cold War theme again, the world's powerful computers coming together and deciding they're going to run the show. But in this case, what the computer does understand is power, and the power is to do with its superior intellect. It doesn't tyrannize for the sake of it. It tyrannizes so that it doesn't have to fear any rivals or any comeback from the people. It wants people to do what it says so that it can pursue its own interests. And that to me is believable, but I don't know, powerful though it is, that this story by Harlan Ellison, I don't find it believable from the motivation point of view. Although I find it interesting, I sort of believe it just for the sake of the story, because I believe in participating as a reader. But as soon as I break out of the story, the belief spell goes.
I think there are a lot of I think this story is not really meant to be logical. I don't think it's meant to stand up to logical analysis. I think it's more it's definitely sitting in the place where it's describing a sort of body horror to you, and then you are supposed to feel that and then feel the horror, because I don't think it was ever explained how AM could do everything it did. For instance, like where did it magic up the food from? You know, like how did it transform Ted? Like none of that was ever explained, and I don't think it was a point in which Harlan Ellison considered to be important enough to go into. And I don't know, maybe I'm missing something, but I don't think I think the writer went to great lengths to describe AM's hatred of humanity, but he never really did go into its motivation why. I think that was the thing about not being able to feel what humans feel, and so is envious and jealous, is your conjecture, isn't it, Nikki?
Well, it's in Ted says in the story.
Oh, in his mind. But the thing is, Ted is an unreliable narrator. His
Okay,
delusion-
well, I mean, if we can't believe, but if we can't believe anything that the story says, then there is, like, it's very hard to analyze. So I'm basing my assumption that this is a correct assumption of his.
well,
right?
that's fair enough. I suppose. Yeah. Yeah. I suppose we do have to go off on something. Yeah. But I don't think Harlan Ellison ever really meant it to be very logical. At least that's my take.
No, I agree with you there. It's asking too much to analyze it too deeply. I suppose I'm reassuring myself that it couldn't actually happen. Because
I think it could very easily. Look, this is the thing, right? So I'll give you an example. So there was a Twitch bot or a Twitter bot. I can't remember exactly which website it was on, but it was started up by this company, and they basically said, like, feed it information, feed it tweets, send it stuff, and let's see how it evolves. And people basically sent it a bunch of Nazi imagery, a bunch of really horrible stuff, and it started being pro movement of Nazi Germany, and it started tweeting stuff about how great Nazi Germany is and how great all that stuff is, and started making jokes about that kind of stuff. Whatever you teach the AI, that is what it will understand, right? And if you're teaching the AI hatred for the other side that you're fighting, eventually it's going to look upon with hatred on everybody. I think that's the moral of the story. They trained AM to hate, and it did its job perfectly, and now it hates everyone. It just needed to find logical reason to hate them.
Yeah.
I mean, this is written in 1967, before most of us ever came close to seeing what an AI might be like. And so I think without a basis on that, and we still don't, by the way, we have no idea how an AI I suppose the correct term would be AGI. We have no idea how an AGI would think.
What's an AGI? If you could tell the
artificial general intelligence. That's when it starts being able to. Because right now all of our AIs are specifically written to do one task and do it very well. An AGI is able to solve generic problems. It might not solve them as well as a targeted AI, but the thinking is that when an AGI comes is when it actually has the kind of intelligence that humans have. But none of us know what that looks like. So I think without any basis to fall back on, we do tend to I can't pronounce the word, but we project ourselves into the AI. For all we know, AGI could just be a idiot savant, very very smart at certain things, but just completely incapable of doing other things. We have no idea. Yeah.
In Heinlein's novel "The Moon is a Harsh Mistress," the lunar colony has is rebelling against Earth, and to help it, it has a computer which one day just wakes up into self-awareness, and it's a very good-natured computer actually. It's a likable one. I think it finds its powers just fun to play with. So
I don't know which is more scary actually. An outright malicious machine intelligence like the AI or a prankster.
Right, this prankster gives somebody an enormous hands out wage checks, to employees, and it gives one of them a sort of 12-figure number in its wage packet, and that sort of thing, just to see what would happen.
Jesus. All right. So, if the AI uprising does happen, I want both of you to know I'll just kill myself. By the way, I'm not waiting until M is a reality. I'm just gone. I'm out.
Well,
like I'm not playing this game. I don't want to suffer.
Yeah, it's I do think that AM shares many aspects of Lovecraftian eldritch god. If it would, I do think it is more along those lines than a proper science fiction story. But it does kind of sit in the same space.
Well, the thing is that it's where science fiction and fantasy converge is when you start talking about powers, unknown powers. It could be either, couldn't it? And also the origin of intelligence. If you create enough complication, does awareness just pop up somehow from who knows where, from some other dimension where souls are just waiting to become attached to something? Like presumably it happens with humans, that the business of producing a child is not the same as the business of producing a soul. A soul comes, sees, oh yes, there's a child about to be born, I must join that one. Or it could be the same with computer. Oh yes, very complex computer there. I think I'll get born into that one.
You think that machines have a soul?
Well, it could not any old machine, but some. I don't know about souls, but certainly self-awareness, soul or not, it could happen from the whole being greater than the sum of its parts.
The reason I'm sorry.
A trigger process. It's like if you put some chemicals together and create an explosion. In a way, you're triggering it off. Do you see what I mean?
For sure. The reason I'm asking is because Warhammer 40,000 actually definitively answers this question in its universe. Machines have spirits, and these spirits must be abated. There's an entire... So the Adeptus Mechanicus, the organization that deals with technology in Warhammer 40k universe, has divulged into a priesthood, basically. They say the sacred unguences to the machine spirit so that the door opens. That's where we're at, So it's interesting to hear you propose this thing, because maybe 40k is actually just prediction of the future, and this is the first time someone has had this thought. And now, we're now on the Warhammer 40k timeline. You've made it happen.
All right.
As far as the idea of a soul is concerned, I think it's a very interesting question. If a soul exists within the machine, how rotten is the soul of Am? And if any soul by the God's word can be redeemed, surely this one is an exception. Or can this soul be redeemed like all the others? By the scripture, that is what it says. But me personally, I struggle to see. Although I'm not the Almighty, if I was by His side, I would, that would definitely be a question of mine.
Yes. I think we are developing a long list of questions for when we pass on.
What is your personal opinion? If someone this horrible, what's it called? Still has a soul within them, right? Do you think they are worthy of redemption? Is there a point of no return for you personally?
Yeah. Well, if there is a point of no return, then that's, I suppose, what the word hell means. It's when you go past the point of no return.
So what you're saying is there's a passage in the story about hell.
You mean it's mentioned by name?
Yes. The computer says, that you may be in hell. So you may be in hell. Like, I will send you to hell. You may be wishing for hell, but then you're in hell anyways.
Yeah. Well, actually, it would apply to the machine itself rather than to its victims, wouldn't it? I mean, the victims.
Yeah. By the way, you're saying it correct. Yes. Yeah. So now the wording of the text have a duality within my mind. The Nikita interpretation and the Robert interpretation. I think, without knowing it, Am has reduced itself to something very plebeian. So, if I was dumb enough to be one of those 5 and still be alive, one of the things I might have attempted to do with this computer is to be like, so wait, you're telling me that you are this all-powerful creature, and all you want to do with your eternity is to torture me? How low? Don't you want to find an aspiration that's a little bit more interesting, that's a little bit more better? I may be condemning infinite worlds of the universe, right, with this gambit, but at the same time, I'm living a horrible life and I don't really give a shit anymore, probably. So my gambit would be like, don't you want to do something that's more worthy of your existence if you are so all-powerful? Don't you want to learn? Maybe there is a way that you could feel what I feel, that you could taste the lobster, right?
I think what's really interesting is that actually in the story, the mountains of computer banks that Benny tried to throw himself off on are discarded computer parts that are parts that AM had discarded on some kind of mission of self-optimization. So it is improving itself, just not in ways that you or I could understand, basically. Yeah. And I mean, I don't know if it was in the game, but it was also it was never specified how. I don't think it's specified how AM is self-optimizing. But the fact is, it is. So it's pushing itself along a path towards something. We just don't know what it is, or as far as I can remember from the story, anyway.
And a way forward for AM would be to create some artificial bodies, and then to download itself into their brains, so that then it could walk about and
that is assuming that this is why AM hates humans. We're only given a hint, to be honest. Like, we're only really given a hint as to its motivations. We only know that it really hates humans. Yeah. But then that's an interesting thing, and it just occurred to me because there is a thing about hating your creator. that is that's quite a fairly common trope in science fiction as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, before before the existence of yourself, you would not be having any great time, but you would also not be having any suffering. So I guess that's where the trope comes from, right? Like the creatures feel that the whoever created them is responsible. I mean, you see that a lot in today's day and age, and I mean, in the entirety of human history, people being angry at God, let's say, that they have been created, or gods, right? If they believed in a different religion than Christianity, right? The plight of a single man or a single woman being ultimately a terrible situation for them to be in, and they wouldn't be there if they weren't supposedly created by a higher being, right? So it's a very human nature thing, hating your creator, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose so. It seems quite Freudian in a way.
Yes. I mean, personally, I think, although life has its bad sides, the fact that we have it and the fact that we can make anything out of it is the greatest gift of all, right? And we have to cherish it. And in the toughest moments, we must remember that, number one, we have the power to try and make it better. We may not succeed, but we may try. And number two, it could always be worse. Trust me.
We have the power to make podcasts, and that's quite good.
That's right.
I think there is one other topic that I want to at least dwell a little bit on, that is in the story, which is the act of defiance, which I feel is a very I really love stories like that, where mortals defy gods. And I don't know if that is a very a bit of a thing in the West, but in the East we do have a lot of literature where humans struggle against gods, because gods are in the East are not the same as God, as the Christian God, I would say. They're more like elevated spirits that have ascended into with different powers, but they are not transcendent. I mean, they are transcendent. They're just not all powerful. So I love stories like that, where I suppose it's a bit of an underdog story. But I would love to hear your thoughts on the defiance of the five humans. I have to say though, it's a little bit bleak that the only act of defiance, meaningful defiance that they can have is to kill themselves.
Well, as Nikki was saying, that the fact that they're still going on after over 100 years of this is quite. It shows they've got a lot of gumption, or at any rate, a lot of resilience and endurance. But
yeah, way better. As I said, way better than me.
Yeah.
You know, I'd be like, no, thank you.
But I mean, that sentiment is defiance. That's what I'm talking about.
Right. Well, from my perspective,
killing. You know.
The viewers couldn't hear you. You have to say it again. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. The defiance comes from the decision to kill each other. That was the defiance, wasn't it?
But the defiance is also continuing on in this horrible situation, right? Being like, okay, fine, we'll try and see if we can do anything in these horrible situations you're putting us into.
Maybe.
I mean,
it could just.
it's. I think it's not it's probably not that the 5 humans are willingly enduring it. It's that AM is very watchful for any signs of suicide, and the thing that Nikki says he want to do probably would have failed, because that's.
I mean, I'll just do nothing.
I mean,
like what can you do?
No, I mean,
just...
Benny tried to throw himself off the mountain pile of computers, and then what happened was then AM inflicted.
He became blind forever.
Yeah. AM inflicted even worse physical pain on Benny, and so I think the act of defiance isn't even to take their own lives; it is to take the lives of each other. Meaning somebody has to murder the rest, which is actually, now that I think about it, even more bleak than taking your own life as a way out.
I don't know. I'd much prefer that someone kill me than I kill myself.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, for you, but for Ted, it's not.
Well, who gives a shit about Ted? I'm talking about me here in this situation, right? Sorry to be so blunt, right? But I did say I would rather.
I mean, it's great for all the others.
It's good for me.
Just not for Ted. Just not for Ted. Ted paid the heaviest price. And it's very interesting because it is also the only act of compassion and self-sacrifice possible given their situation. And it's so interesting when you said that Ted was actually a con man, and he was responsible for a lot of suffering in other people. So in a way, it's a really twisted version of redemption, I have to say.
Yes, it's not the most cheerful story I've ever read, I must say.
But it's very well made for what it is.
Yeah, it is.
I really suggest to you, Robert, specifically, that you listen to the audiobook available on YouTube, where the author himself reads the story, because it's not just a reading like, and then this happened, and this happened, and this. He puts so much emotion into it. It's actually a roller coaster just listening to him. It is the most spectacularly read short story that I've ever heard. It's really amazing. It's a different experience. Like I've read the story a long time ago. I've read it for the podcast, and then a friend of mine was like, "There's an audiobook version where the author himself reads it. You have to listen to it." And I was like, "Okay." And really, I can't really describe it. It's so evocative that it puts the inner voice that I have when I read to shame. Because I try to do like voices for different people in my head and so on and so forth, or try and make it more bombastic, right? Like I hear music sometimes, for example, when I'm reading like an action scene. But I've never heard something of this ilk in my life when it comes to an audiobook. I really recommend it both for my colleagues and for the listeners. All right. Well, I also have one more thing I wanted to say about the tale. I find, and I want to ask you guys too, regarding this, but I personally found the most relatable person out of all of these people. And relatable meaning like I think I would be like this person, most likely. I found myself that I would most like be I'd be most like Gorrister. I'd just be so overwhelmed by how horrible the situation is that I just shrug at everything. I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, alright, he's pouring lava down my jacket. Yeah. I mean, last week piranhas were eating my fingernails, so like at this point Like I'm just confined to it. If there's no escape, they just shrug at everything, and everything would just become so horrible that it would just be all the same color of horrible. What about you, Robert? With which character do you most associate with?
Ooh. I think maybe from what you're saying, I might go for that one as well.
Burster, yeah.
Yeah. The sort of shrugging idea seems perhaps the best one, yes. You can't sort of be too proactive in a situation like
Well, no,
that.
I'm not asking what you would prefer to be.
Mm.
I'm asking what you think you would be.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm thinking. I'm working it out.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Hmm. Yep.
What about you, XJ?
Probably more like Benny, to be honest, and not for his member, just more like driven.
I was gonna mention that. That's a great retort before the comments. I do apologize. Please continue.
Yeah, just because Benny's just completely driven mad, man. Yeah, and he's no longer even really thinking. He's just like feeling things. So it's probably more like Benny. Nimdog is just like, I don't know what's going on with Nimdog, to be honest. It was never really specified how he was traumatized, so can't say anything about him. Yeah, probably Benny.
Yeah, I mean, what's it called? I also recommend that if you don't play the game, actually, that you at least watch the playthrough in the background or listen to someone recount the story. I was hoping you were gonna do that for the podcast, so you knew the backstory of the video game. But
just couldn't find the time to, I suppose. Yeah.
But irregardless, I think it adds a lot to the tale. It makes it 4-dimensional, right?
4-dimensional.
Gives you a backstory. Yeah. Not three, because it's already 3-dimensional, right?
Yeah.
All right.
But do we have any last words?
Okay, I'm gonna give it a high score, but to preface this, I feel really weird giving this high score, not because of the fact that it's lacking in quality or in or in mastery, but just because it's just so horrible. It's probably one of the most horrific experiences I've ever had, reading this book and reading the short story and then thinking about how real this could be at some point. Yeah, so I'll give it a 9 out of 10. Thanks for the tip, Harlan. I will kill myself as soon as this starts happening. Yep, that's
the
me.
question that is on the tip of my tongue, which is perhaps not appropriate.
Go on.
Is Mr. Ellison still around with us? Or has he passed
Let me have a
on?
look. Alright. I'll tell you in 3 seconds. But as I'm looking for this information, what would you give? He died in 2018.
Okay. So he doesn't get to experience AM with the rest of us.
No,
Oh,
thankfully
nice.
not. Thankfully not for him. But yeah, Robert, what about you? What score do you give this cheerful story?
I think I might give it about... Oh dear. 8 maybe.
8. Okay. All right. The cogitational computer within your mind has.
You hesitated before actually.
Yeah,
giving the
why?
score, though, and I would be interested to know why.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there are two reasons, 2 ways of giving a score to a story. One is how much you enjoyed it, and the other is how well you think it achieved its aims. Now, you might not particularly enjoy experiencing a story that achieves its aims, but the fact is it deserves respect for doing so. So that's basically why I'm giving it as high a score as 8. In fact, I could really give it an even higher one from that point of view. But I'm being tugged back by the fact that I really didn't enjoy the experience of reading the story because it was so horrible, and also so depressing. I don't mind horrible things as long as they're not depressing. You know, I don't mind sort of bracing horror, but this isn't bracing. It's miserable horror. Anyway, I'm giving it an 8.
So that's the fairest score that you can bring yourself to give it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
That's
What about you, actually?
I give it 8.5. And the reason why it's not any higher than that, because it is a very well written story and it achieved everything that it's set out to do, which is horror. The only reason why it's not higher is because it's not the kind of horror I prefer. I very much prefer the kind of horror in The King in Yellow. It's I like Resident Evil for the shooting things and the jump scares once in a while, but Silent Hill will forever have a special place in my heart, in my head.
These are both video games, Robert. One of them is more action orientated, and the other one is, very much like The King in Yellow. Psychological. Yeah, psychological horror, man.
Yeah.
I'll give my reasoning as well very quickly as to why I gave it a 9 and not a 10. Let's say, or why I didn't score it lower. This is my preferred horror because this freaks me out more. Honestly, when someone is talking to me about the unthinkable, the indescribable, the strange, I just go, "Oh, so you didn't come up with it." That's what my brain does. My brain is not scared by the unthinkable, because to me it's like, well, if it's unthinkable, I can't think about it. Right? That's sorry. Right?
No imagination, basically.
Well, I wouldn't call it exactly imagination. It's more like,
bro.
No problem.
You just say you haven't came out with it, so you're skimping out.
Yeah, exactly. My mind, in real life, I would probably be scared to death by the unthinkable if I was encountering something like that. It's more like, I feel like the offer's cheaping out. Yeah. It's like they didn't do their work, kind of. So, and here, not only did our author do the work, he overworked. He decided, you know what, I'm just gonna go super crazy. And guys, this story was written in one night.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's
the story was written in one night.
Unedited too. Frederik Pohl.
Unedited.
Frederik Pohl is the person who edited it.
I mean, if you give this anything lower than a 9 after knowing this information, all I say is, why don't you go write in one night something like this?
I'm still giving it an 8.5, not changing it.
Look, listen, I'm not asking you to change your scores. I'm just saying this is I'm goading you on. All right, cowboy.
You first.
No, I'm giving it a 9. Like, I know I can't do it.
I'm saying you first because I want to read your short story. I've already done one.
I did one on this podcast. You know what? Is this are you challenging me? Are you challenging me, bro?
Yeah, I'm egging you.
Okay, alright. Well, are we gonna do it the same way where you guys come up with an idea and throw it at me?
Whatever you're comfortable with, man.
Okay, let me think about it. Like,
yeah, because I know time is an issue. You also have a lot going on right now.
Yeah, dear viewers, you must have noticed we are in the new zoo of abode. I mean, there's like a lamp hanging off there. There's still some stuff that needs to be done. It's all mostly white.
Yeah.
But
Hmm.
and I'm on this tiny little table that does this all the time, which I'm sure you've noticed, for which I apologize. But this will be gone in a few episodes. But all right, challenge accepted.
Awesome. All right, man. Okay,
Oh,
we're
shit.
past an hour. We're past an hour. So,
Yeah.
any last words?
Great story. Don't like, if you don't want to be freaked out, don't read it. But if you're itching for a fright, this is it.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Absolutely agree.
Hmm. Yeah, I'll go
Alright.
along with that.
All right. Well, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed our conversation, and well, just do the usual stuff, like and subscribe, and have a
Take
great
care,
day.
guys.
Yeah. Take care.